The following is a DW Ancient Egypt production. Pharaoh Siptah ruled Egypt for almost 6 years as a young man from 1197 to 1191 BC. Siptah was only a child of 10 or 11 years when he assumed power, since a medical examination of his mummy reveals that the king was about 16 years old when he died. His mummy reveals that he had a twisted leg indicative of cerebral palsy. The older Queen Twosret, in effect, ruled in her stepson's name. Initially, Twosret was supported in her regency by the Chancellor of the whole land, Bey, a man whose unusual name implies that he may have been of Syrian descent. Bey's precise role is never made clear, but his claim to have established the king on his father's throne indicates that he may have played a crucial role in installing and maintaining the young Siptah and Twosret as king. He was granted permission by the king to build a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, an unprecedented privilege for a commoner. Bey is first revealed as Seti II's butler and personal scribe. By the time of Seti II's death, Bey had risen to the post of chancellor and played the role of kingmaker. Bey's status was so great at Siptah's court that on several of the young king's monuments, the chancellor is shown on the same scale. This is the earliest occasion in which a commoner was depicted in such a manner. For 4 years, Bey was the dominant figure in Egyptian politics. Then, like Senamut before him, he vanished. Chancellor Bey most likely later fell out of favor at court, presumably for overreaching himself, and was executed in year 5 of Siptah's reign, on orders of the king himself. Interestingly, news of his execution was passed to the workmen at Deir el-Medina, and they were told to cease all work on decorating Bey's tomb, since Bey had now been deemed a traitor to the state. He was never buried in his tomb, KV-13, which was later reused in the 20th dynasty. KV-13 consists of 3 corridors, followed by 2 chambers, E and F, 2 further corridors, 2 side chambers off the second, and a burial chamber. The tomb has suffered structural damage from floods, and all the ceilings of the tomb have collapsed. The walls were probably decorated originally with painted plaster and relief. Severe floods have caused the loss of the plaster, however, and now only traces of decoration remain in places where the artist was working on thin plaster and the chiseling cut into the bedrock. Siptah has left no record of any queen consort, although this does not mean, of course, that he did not marry. Presumably with Twosret effectively ruling on his behalf, he, or perhaps she, did not feel the need for another powerful female figure. Twosret herself could continue to perform the consort's role. Siptah died a year after Bey's execution and was buried in the upper part of the Valley of the Kings. His tomb, KV-47, consists of 3 gently sloping corridors, followed by a chamber E, a pillared chamber F, 2 subsequent corridors, and a chamber I that leads through a passage with abandoned lateral cuttings for a burial chamber. These are followed by the actual unfinished burial chamber containing a granite sarcophagus. The entrance of the tomb consists of a ramp with divided stairs. The tomb was left unfinished. Only the first corridors and chamber were plastered and decorated. His large red granite sarcophagus still remains in the unfinished burial hall, but his body, notable for its deformity of a club foot, was found in the cache in the tomb of Amenhotep II in 1898. Siptah's death at just 20 years old left Egypt without an obvious heir. Now Twosret stepped forward, apparently unopposed, to become a fully fledged king. Superficially, the circumstances of her ascent, the lack of a son, the young stepson, and the prominent male supporter, recall the circumstances of Hatshepsut's reign, some 250 years earlier. But while Hatshepsut had inherited a flourishing kingdom with a stable political infrastructure, Twosret faced a rapidly escalating political crisis. Since Ramses II, the royal family had grown feeble and was plagued by infighting. Ramses II had left far too many descendants, each with an equally weak claim to the throne. The empire, once an unfailing source of revenue, was starting to dwindle. There was inflation, occasional food shortages, and sporadic civil unrest on the Theban West Bank. Meanwhile, on the western border, various Libyan tribes were threatening the security of the Nile Delta. Twosret's reign lasted a mere 2 years and had little impact on the archaeological record. She continued Siptah's regnal years, thus allowing later historians to completely overlook her reign. Her only substantial monuments are the unfinished mortuary temple that stood to the south of the Ramesseum and her Valley of the King's tomb, KV-14. This tomb had a checkered history. Begun under Siptah in year 2, it was extended by Twosret, possibly to receive the burials of herself and her husband, Seti II, but it was later usurped by Seknakht, the first king of the 20th dynasty. The tomb entrance of KV-14 is cut into the base of the cliff face, at the end of the southwest branch of the main wadi. The short open entryway is followed by 3 corridors, decorated in sunken relief, with scenes of the queen accompanying Siptah, subsequently changed to Seti II, before various deities, followed by representations of the guardians of the portals of the realm of Osiris from the Book of the Dead. Chamber E has no shaft cut into its floor. It was succeeded by a pillared Chamber F with a central descent, but without the usual flanking pair of pillars. There are 2 corridors beyond the descent, followed by a Chamber I. There is a side chamber off the left south wall, a corridor G, thought by some to have been intended as a burial chamber in an earlier phase of the tomb's construction. The first burial chamber, J1, has a vaulted ceiling and sunken floor flanked by 2 rows of 4 pillars on benches to the front and rear. 4 unfinished side chambers are located at the corners of burial chamber J1. The corridor to the west, with 2 side chambers, represents an abandoned start of the cutting of a second burial chamber. A second corridor leads to the ultimate second burial, J2, of larger dimensions than the first one. This chamber also has a sunken central floor and vaulted ceiling, flanked by 2 rows of 4 pillars on benches to the front and rear. The 4 side chambers were completely cut but undecorated, and only the front wall of the burial chamber received preliminary drawings for decoration. A broken sarcophagus and lid are located right of the center of the sunken floor. An unfinished axial corridor to the rear has an abandoned gateway cutting in each side. Twosret's reign ended in civil war. It is not known if she was overthrown by her successor or whether she died peacefully in her old age.